I'm close to the street, by the way. It's kind of dead around here, but it's still the street. So
Yeah,
you guys,
6 Folsom.
yeah, if anything gets obnoxious, let me know.
Right, I think we can get started.
Should I go grab my old Astro sketches?
Yeah, I've probably got a pile down in the archive.
I got a bunch.
You're probably better at it than we've been, man.
Nah.
25 years of crazy down there.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another session of Lens. My name is Hector Silva. And before we jump into our session here with our guest, Brett Lovelady of Astro, and our special guest moderator, Spencer Nugent, I just want to give everyone just a thank you for being a part of this experience and these initiatives that Advanced Design has. I also want to thank my team who really helps me and helps essentially the whole team make this happen. You know, Bethany Chan, who is our visual designer. We have other designers on our team, Betul Benitez, Tiffany Doe, but without their help, you know, this wouldn't be possible. So I just want to give them a shout out. A little bit about our guest designer, Brett Lovelady. He's the founder of the driving force behind Astro Studios based in San Francisco, a company which he launched in 1994. A little bit about Brett. Brett, you were the vice president of design at Lunar and at Frog prior to starting Astro. So you stayed in the Bay Area, super prestigious firms in Astro as well. You have worked with powerhouse companies such as Nike, Microsoft, HP, Alienware, Herman Miller, to name just to name a couple of the brands here. And essentially, you've created, you know, products that we were all kind of raised as far as bringing pop culture and things like that. At Astro, you also recently spun off a new company called Astro Gaming, which is the first high-performance video game equipment and lifestyle products for all levels of serious gamers. We are super excited to collaborate with you, and Astro has also been a really big supporter of what we've done. In the fall, we held Square One, our annual design conference, and Astro was a gracious host. We hosted Norio as one of our guest speakers. So we feel that Astro has always been, you know, extremely helpful to us and very supportive with our mission. And a little bit about Spencer. Spencer, again, you know, like I mentioned before, the design community is so small. Spencer has been a, you know, keynote speaker at our past conferences at Square One, has been an advisor. He was our first guest designer on Lens, and you know, founder of sketchaday.com. And you know, Spencer, thank you so much for being here. And we thought it was fitting to just invite you to come on, since you have a very close relationship with Astro and with Brett. So without further ado, I'm gonna kind of give the floor over to Brett, and then we'll kind of go from there.
All right, thanks, Hector. You know, Brett's been more than just my first boss out of college. He's been a mentor and friend and support through many times in my life. So I'm really excited to sit through another talk of Brett's. He's had I mean, I can't say enough about his experience and the impact Astro has had on the design world and the world at large, and San Francisco design, frankly. Just a little bit of context about our connection. Brett, I mean, he gave me my first chance, my first internship, and I'll always be grateful for that. I remember just being there and hustling and working really hard. So I just want to say before we start, Brett, thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it. Not only your hard work, but, you know, I've just enjoyed seeing you go from the very beginnings to where you are now. It's just been so much fun to watch.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Hector. Thanks for having us. You know, advanced design is on the forefront of so much right now. It's really fun to watch you guys advance yourselves. You know, it's been pretty cool. And I'm really excited. Spencer came in. That was like a nice, perk for me. Like, we catch up a lot, but it's been a little bit. And, I love seeing what he's doing. And, he knows where all the skeletons are buried, so he might dig up a few.
Well, I won't grill you too hard.
We'll see how that goes. All right. Well, I guess I promised something here, a little bit more than me answering questions and blathering on. So I'll give you guys a little bit of background. I think I've got some things to throw up on the screen. I guess I can go ahead and screen share from here, right?
I believe so, yeah.
That's correct.
All right. You know what? It says the host has disabled my screen sharing. So
oh, no. All right, let's see.
You need to re-host me. But while we're getting there, that's fine. I think the title here was, the Bay Area Design, and then 30 years in. And that's me. I think I might be your oldest guest to date. I'm not sure. We'll see how that goes. But I've been in the Bay Area since '87, and kind of want to just give you guys a little bit of feeling and framework, and maybe a few things that I've learned along the way.
I think you should be able to screen share now if you want to give it a shot.
We're good. All right. I'm going to try to run my keynote too. So might have to start out a little rough here to see how it goes. You guys tell me if sometimes it doesn't advance, as I've learned being a Zoom jockey the last couple of months. So you guys tell me, you see that okay? And
this is good to
say hello. Hello?
Yep.
Oh, that's working. All right. Well, hello. All right. It's nice to virtually meet all of you guys. We're pretty familiar with Zoom working at distance, but just as a little heads up, our whole Astro crew has been out of the office for over 2 months here in the Bay Area. And I think we'll be there until the end of the month, and we hope to get back at it. It's interesting to do design at distance. We do that with a lot of our clients, but right now I've got people at home with their families, their kids, their dogs, and trying to collaborate in virtual spaces. And it's been an awesome experience. We've actually learned a lot, and I'm really proud of my crew for doing what they're doing. So I will try to make this as streamlined as possible. Welcome to the Bay Area. It looks a little like this right now, even fewer cars and people than you see here, I think. Look out the window. So Astro Studios, it's a company I founded. We'll talk about that in the 30 years in. Like I mentioned, in '87 was when I showed up in the Bay Area and fell in love with it, and the challenge and the energy and the entrepreneurism. So hopefully you'll feel a little of that in the work that we're going to share here in a sec. I guess I'll do a little bit of background in that people always ask me, like, why Astro? Why did you call it Astro? What's the deal? And, one is it's just such a cool word, and it, evokes a lot of history and things. And as we all grew up in a space age, if you will, the idea that, the infinity of space, all this kind of good stuff, but it comes right down to it. As a good friend of mine and a past employee once said, space is dope. That's why. So right here in the Bay Area, it's technology, culture, and design. Man, we feel like we live right at the epicenter of that. And that's been just an amazing blessing to our work and the work that we've done. Little motorcycle, sorry about that. Going forward, what I mean by that too a little bit, I'll give you an example. Like in any one day, we might be working on like a crazy like radar system for Google and this SDK we did for them called SOULFUL, or we might be working on the next generation of goggles for electric snowboarding. And all of that happens here, right? It's like, it's the interplay of those types of things. But for me, it's always the people, and it comes down to the people and the idea that people in our environment are the talent, but they're also the inspiration, right? So we like to think that we come from that human advocacy first, sort of the first position of all of it. And it definitely is the case here for the team. We create brands, products with brands, pure products, experiences, obviously a lot of connected mobile experiences. That's what we do day in and day out. Little background, 26 years for Astro here. We do what we consider work for hire. We often will co-create, work with startups to create things from scratch, or work with brands to extend them. And then we'll originate. Sometimes it's like, hey, here's an idea. How can we make that into a real product or real brand or full property? We have spun off 3 companies. I'll touch on those as we move through. We're pretty proud of one fact that we've produced over 500 products that are in the marketplace, and that, they create revenue. About 50 brands as well. We've always had product and brand design and development here. They work with each other, especially in consumer markets where We consider ourselves consumer design experts. And that's sort of, this is just to show you a client sampling. Lots of big names, there's lots of names around it. But for us, it's the key is the diversity. Like we've been able to bring a lot of not only our interdisciplinary approach, but work in very diverse markets, learning a lot from those markets and cross-pollinating in a lot of those areas. That's been one of the hallmarks of Astros, being able to work in so many different areas. We've been very, very fortunate there. 87 and beyond. So as Hector mentioned, my first 6-7 years, I worked at 3 places that are now owned by other companies. I think about it. I worked at a company called Tandem Computers, advanced supercomputer company. You might have to Google that one because they were bought by Compaq, and then Compaq bought by HP. And for all you young folks out there, I'm sure you won't know who Tandem is, but it was supercomputers, awesome place to start. Fell in love with the Bay Area, but I needed to work in the consulting space. So I went to work for Lunar Design. Lunar's awesome as well. They're now owned by McKinsey and have become McKinsey Design, but amazing people, Bay Area, old school ID firm, mechanical, just the best. From there, I went into Frog Design. I wanted to see how the international, design set lived, and Frog was the perfect place for that as well. Both there and at Lunar, I became vice president and essentially learned that if I'm going to work that hard, I might as well start my own business. So in 1994, I bounced out of there and became Astro Studios. Again, we wanted to reflect the Bay Area. We were in Palo Alto to start out. And just to give you some flavor of that, I'm going to go off my usual presentation script and just share some more with you guys. This was actually our first office. It's downtown Palo Alto. It was a laundromat. After we took on, the place smelled like dryer sheets for years while we were in there. But right downtown Palo Alto in the shadow of IDEO, they were massive. We were not. We're right there. If you look straight across the street, you would see an alley, and that was our alley, because on the right side where it says Village something or other, Cobblers, that was actually our office, and we had a shop there and a little storefront. And to the left was actually Steve Jobs' private office before he went back to Apple. That's how long ago that was. So we used to share a parking lot with him. We have RC car races out there and get in his way and all kinds of stuff. But that was Palo Alto back in the day. Now it's full of venture capitalists and cosmetic surgeons and stuff. But so we moved up to the city later. We'll talk about that. But this was formulative for us in those years. For us, it was about reflecting the California West Coast culture. How would we best express that? And so we jumped into a lot of things early on. This was like an early graphic piece that we did. Our tagline back in the early days was "Damn fine design." We didn't have all the disciplines figured out, so we were like, all right, we have one goal in mind, and that was it. But we did create something called Astro Theory, and this is something we've held on to and refined and tried to prove, sometimes disprove, but usually it's held up well for us. So the idea that people are our ultimate clients, that's really where we come from, human advocacy. Like that's our job in the process. I think that's where designers should live as well, as being that human advocacy, because everyone else in the disciplines are doing their part. But I think it's where it starts. Design is a point of view. It's not necessarily your files or your sketches or your models or your artifacts. It's having a point of view and then using all of those skills to perform and to show that point of view. I believe as a team, we got to empower individual creativity. We may work as a group, but you gotta find those individual ideas and bring them forth and try to empower them wherever possible. I love the idea of being proactive over reactive. Don't ask me what I could do something and show it to me, and then let's talk about where it's going. So that's a concept that, we'd way rather pull you back than push you out. Design is a democracy. There's not a democracy. That's a kind of a personal belief as well. You probably heard it, but it's a great, democratic process and group, and, let's play into that. But at some point, someone's got to decide, someone's got to own it, and someone's got to put an individual, responsibility measure on it. And so for us, I think design has to have that. It can't be just committee design. Culture is key to soulful work. Absolutely believe that. I think designers flourish in a culture they're comfortable with and they're uninhibited by. So we like to think of Astro here as a designer habitat where they actually can live and flourish and do their best work. And then the last thing, we encourage our team to challenge anything. A lot of times we're given design briefs or we're given a lot of givens, if you will, in a project. But I think, do it professionally, but let's challenge anything. Like maybe we should rethink that. What about this idea? Let's bring that forward and not just accept what everybody's kind of gives you. So Astro Theory started early on. We did some products that have now almost never seen the light of day. Early on with Apple, if you guys remember the Newton, any of you done your history homework, they kind of came to us with projects of what else can we do with the Newton? So we did the smart backpack. We did this like hypermedia set-top box. A lot of stuff that was sort of like this interface. After the Newton flamed out, they had this really great operating system. We're like, we got to find a home for some of this. So this is how we started. It was like, okay, can we bring this into new lifestyle arenas? We started doing graphic work for a lot of our friends. At the time, Stone's Throw Records down in LA, they were up here. We did their first identity. We did all kinds of graphic design and brand development for them and a lot of their artists. That sort of set the tone for Astro as well. Working for companies in the action sports industry, there was a strong action sports thread early on with our teams. We did things like, the electric identity for electric eyewear, their first identity system and whatnot. Lots of stuff in surf and skate and snow and motorsports as well. This was our first great adventure. We started a company while everybody was building .coms. We decided to create a golf company. Go figure. So the idea was subpar golf, with the idea that, all of our friends in surf and skate and snow were playing golf and they needed a brand to rally around. And so we started to develop this whole product company and spun it off, raised some capital. And after about 3 years, shut it down. That's a longer story that we have time for. But that was our first adventure into owning and operating our own products and brands. What was happening during that time is we were actually starting to do a lot of consumer electronics and bringing a lot of sort of what I consider the cultural lifestyle elements to new areas. This was one for us, which was early on, actually won a Design of the Decade award, created a whole bunch of products for a company called Kensington, which is an accessory company. That sort of gave us the confidence to continue to build into new areas. That one actually springboarded us into something we did in '99, which was our first Nike project. This really set the DNA for the whole office. So the Nike Triax series actually also won us a Design of the Decade award from Business Week, but it validated what we were doing in an interesting way. Nike was like using us as their scout team into new territories. This was their first electronic product, their first watches. It was a collaboration with Seiko. It was just an amazing time to be involved here. Our whole goal at that time was to really improve the sport of running. And fortunately with them and their partners, we were able to do it. But from an Astro standpoint, we're like, why did everybody like this so much? And so we broke it down into something. We said, like, let's define this idea of integrating soulful design, right? So tapping into people's passions, like looking for those, like in this case, it was runners, going beyond the function and the aesthetics. It's like, okay, how does this, something that people will, it'll take care of what they want it to do, but you want them to wear it every day. You want them to express their identity. Hopefully in expressing that, there's like a certain amount of joy and love and lust as it becomes a consumer product. You want people to like, I don't know, man, I just want one of those products. What is it about the product? For us, sometimes it's transcending the obvious. Like in this case, it's like, well, if you tilt the display and you oversize it and do some things that hadn't been done at that time, like we were forcing the technology forward as well. And then overall, what became a mantra for us from that day on has been, how do we as designers improve the human experience? That's a question we ask ourselves at the beginning of every project now. So this was the 90s for Astro. Our Nike relationship continued on for about 18 years, where we were really like their scout team into these new areas. First golf clubs, first hockey helmet, first in a lot of categories of products as well. So that was the 90s. We'll jump over into the 2000s. In 2000, we moved up to San Francisco, and we moved into the Mission District. Right there under the auto glass sign where these guys are hanging out was our first office in the Mission. Spencer remembers this. This is where his internship began, I believe. So
you guys had a skate ramp, right?
Yeah, we had a little skate ramp in the front lobby. There's nothing like your receptionist answering the phone and some guy, about 6 feet overhead on a skateboard. So it's fun, some fun times. Awesome area. It was really changed a lot. But we were there for a good run. This became an interesting time because it was after 9/11, 2001, a lot of changes in the world. And we hit stride in the gaming industry. So this was sort of our gaming era. Did a lot of other stuff, but at this point we had done a lot of things. We were working with Alienware. Out of this studio, we designed the Xbox 360 and all of their accessories. Came up with the idea for Astro Gaming that I'll talk about in a second. And we also helped HP begin their launch into buying Voodoo and going into the PC gaming industry. The Xbox 360, just like the Nike work, was like another milestone that just set us off into another level with a variety of clients. We did everything on that product except for, oddly enough, the gaming headset, which was an off-the-shelf product. We did the controller and the box itself. The fun part was we talked about in terms of the original Xbox was like the Hulk, and we were designing Bruce Lee. That became sort of the inspiration for coming up with the vertical, the stance, the Xbox 360, the first wireless Xbox, all kinds of stuff. So going back into a lot of your childhoods, I'm sure, in this work. The fun part was we got to work with Microsoft for years after that, helping them launch not only the Xbox, but a whole variety of other products and explorations, much like we were doing with Nike. So moving that forward, one of the things that inspired us was our next big adventure, which was to create Astro Gaming. So we moved again. We moved out of the Mission. We came over to the Soma district, south of Market. This is a little bit of an expression from one of our stellar creative directors to kind of show you the neighborhood almost. It's not quite the real neighborhood, but it's really close. You can tell. So this is it. A lot of fun kind of moving into the new space where we could really kind of really stretch out. And this is where we are today. It's actually developed to be like a gallery on the first floor. We've got a lab, a project room on the second, got a studio on the top. And that full designer habitat was the goal of setting up here. Out of that, we also started Astro Gaming. It actually grew as a separate company, venture-backed company, with the whole idea of going out and improving the game, or improving the world of esports. We wanted to essentially improve the sport of gaming. So we brought a lot of our action sports and team sports history, brought it into the video gaming space, and created Astro Gaming, starting with headsets. So we went right into the pro pits, define the products, design the products, crafted the brand, used our own name. You know, we basically backed it with a lot of our experience with Xbox and Alienware to basically show the world what professional gaming could be like from an accessory standpoint. The first products were all direct to consumer, lots of customization, premium materials. We feel really fortunate at that time we were able to essentially improve the sport of gaming, but also validate it in some interesting ways. We ran it for about 5 or 6 years. We actually sold the company to Skull Candy in around 2011, helped operate it for a couple of years. A few years later, they sold it to Logitech. Logitech now owns the company, and it's doing amazingly well worldwide. So Astro Gaming, you get some sense of what we were able to originate and where it is today. That work we mentioned on Nike as the next, if you will, evolution of our company. We ended up doing the fuel band for them, working with some amazing partners in manufacturing and digital as well. But it all started with the idea that you have to, you know, give someone something to wear every day, like jewelry, but it'll actually provide something. And sort of, you know, this sort of kicked off a lot of the quantified self movement that Nike was interested in. It actually came from some earlier work we'd done on how to reward kids to go out and be active, come back and reward them. And so then we finally got to commercialize this idea for the London Olympics. So the fuel band was the first product kind of in that state. And then we saw like every wearable you can imagine after that. You know, part of it was to like extend beyond running for them, but into all kinds of like lifestyle areas while still achieving something that could actually be manufactured and developed. We did everything that we could on the ID. It was obviously called, the project was actually called Fuel, and the fuel gauge, if you will, was a big part of the icon that was developed here. But we had to develop even the font for the display and all the materialization along with some really amazing engineering partners. And then you got to pass the mirror test, and you got to look for other partners as time goes on. So that was another milestone for Astro. As I mentioned, we saw every kind of wearable after that. Our friends at Owlet were putting wearables on babies. You know, we're trying to figure out how to monitor stuff with sensors. You know, we created this great little charging station, nightlight, out of that product. You guys, some of you may have seen the Kenza product here recently. You know, it's a connected device to kind of see where the hot spots are for temperatures. We all need that right now, actually. Get some idea of that product. We've done a lot in connected devices. One of the most fun recently was working with Bose frames. So these are their audio or even AR audio eyewear, a whole series of eyewear there. But it's kind of interesting. You could have technology all day long, but if people won't wear it or won't pass the mirror test, it lives in your drawer. They get rid of it. So you have to make something that, you know, is really kind of fashionable and acceptable by a variety of people. This has been a lot of fun project working with them. And then another product with them was the Sleep Buds. Pulled this out of the lab and an acquisition and helped them commercialize this quite rapidly as well. But part of this is dealing with like the mobile experience. Like how do you not only have the product, but deal with the aspects of content. The reason I bring this up is like probably a third of all programs right now, mobile experiences are wrapped into those, well beyond a companion app. But you know, how do you work in hardware and digital, physical, the intangible nature of, you know, time and space and services and all kinds of interesting things. That leads us to something that's actually bubbled up a lot for us about, again, another third of our project. I think a lot of this comes from the fact that we've done a lot of our own products as well, but as a holistic approach. So the idea that we're starting with insights, which we at Astro have insights director and research team as well, right? Understanding what consumers want. Then we move into the physical product and the UX. In parallel, we're maybe in this case naming the product, we're looking at packaging, we're looking at the out-of-box experience, and then we're looking at the mobile experience. That's a holistic approach. That used to be 4 or 5 firms, 3 or 4 firms. Now we can do that all in one place here, and there are other of our competitors that do this as well. But it's a different approach to looking at how you develop a complete property or experience for a product that people use a little differently than just tools and artifacts. We've done a lot in audio, a lot of new brands. Our brand team has been with us from the beginning and continues to put a lot of what we do into context. We do a lot of pure brand projects now as well, so naming and branding and positioning. But then when they all come together, like with Soul Republic here, you know, it's an inventive product, you know, it's an amazing kind of setup atmosphere and a strong brand identity. Same sort of thing in this wearable was a company called Link by AKC. Link is basically a dog fitness tracker, if you will. You know, one product that had to fit everybody, and you know, we had to come up with a name, which was Link. American Kennel Club's behind it. My favorite tagline: "Do you speak dog?" You know, and then how does this product work, and you know, and help improve your relationship with your animal, but also sharing information later with other dog owners, for example. Packaging, out of box, direct to consumer, all the digital, all the physical. Even we did Times Square advertising for this one as well. Shinola, awesome company, watch company, but the CEO called and said, "Hey, I want to do electronics and I want to do audio." So we got to work with them and develop a way to basically make these products all in the US, which is really difficult, by the way. But we were able to pull that off because of their great patience and investment. So the turntable, really fun heirloom quality products, you know, the headphones. We went into things like power products. And the clock, the iconic clock for us was really fun because we got to take it off the wrist and put it on the wall. We put it on this little stand so you could still see the back of it if you didn't want to put it on the wall because it's just as beautiful. And our last little adventure here is a company called -8. We own a watch company here. We want in San Francisco. It's a fashion watch company. Part of that was like we've been in the watch business, designed a lot of watches for other people, and we felt like it was time for us to do that with this love of machines. And these products for us sort of continued that expression in something that you could wear every day. So you get a sense of how the products look, the packaging, again, that origination, and those products are alive online today. This is our last tagline. It's no longer damn fine design. It's the one currently, fight gravity. For us, I think you could say that's fight mediocrity, fight the expected. Part of that is like, it's a struggle, it's a striving that needs to happen. So this has been a tagline for us that's actually been pretty inspiring for our team and our clients for quite a while. What this leads me to is sort of the last little section. You guys got lots of portfolio and the decades there in the last few minutes. This one for me is like to talk about the DNA in the West Coast. Even the Western US, I think has some things that are unique, and you know, having lived through this for the last 30 years, I think these are things to take advantage of, whether you're here or somewhere else. Grab a drink real quick. All right. What's kind of interesting is there's this 200 years of go West culture. I don't know if you guys have really examined it or looked into it, but if you live here, you really feel it. Excuse me. You really feel that sort of license, if you will. You know, and it's very much about modern machines. It's also about technology, and it's about the future and the connectedness. Now it's social media. Started out in the early days, you know, it was about land and water and gold cattle and the ocean and shipping. And now here we are, it's technology, right? It's chips and it's connected devices, and now it's social media and software. So there's that permeation of acceptance, if you will, to explore and to continue to like reinvent itself on a constant basis. So that DNA, comes into Hollywood, Silicon Valley. Those are kind of blended these days. A lot of it comes out of the schools, the Stanfords and the Berkeleys up here in the Bay Area as well, and all throughout the West for that matter. Military technologies, aerospace, there's a lot of things that go on here that have led to that space age influence as well. And then gateway to Asia Pacific. That's been the case. There's so much great connectivity here in and day out basis. So many of our things are made and sold, around the world, but the connection between here and Asia is been an awesome accelerator as well. It's launched companies you guys are all familiar with, but it has a lot of why even companies come here to set up and to launch that startup culture, either shooting for this kind of fame, if you will, or just a good launch pad. So that West Coast leadership is real. We've lived it and benefited by it, and we exaggerate it and share it wherever we can. It is very entrepreneurial. I think people encourage people to like, you want to try something, go do it, get on with it, team up with some people, make that happen. I think you have a license to lead and be soulful and not necessarily safe, and conservative on all aspects, but to like find things that, have hopefully a deeper meaning to people and they really love over time. And licensing to lead, sorry. So the idea about license to lead for us has always been, like, why wait for someone else? Is like, get out and, you have permission, if you will. It's not so constrained, or, people are kind of encourage you to do that. And they also encourage you to fail. It's okay. Like, I've seen more people like flame out in startups here, for example, and pick themselves up and have like an amazing run after that, and a whole nother level of success. And that's okay. And I don't think that's everywhere as well. And then there's this gold rush fever. It is a little bit of a magnet, right? People want to come here and like, roll the dice and see what they can get out of life. That creates a certain type of atmosphere with a certain type of, personality, and all of that feeds off of each other. So, the West Coast for us became special, became addictive, and one of the reasons we're still here today. Signature a friend of mine once said, I thought it was great, that you don't have to be smart enough and fast. It's better to be being smart enough and fast is better than being too smart and slow. And so there is something about like, don't wait for the perfect time. It's like, just be smart enough, get it out there, get moving, and amazing things happen. So now that I screwed up that whole little end part, you get the idea. Q&A.
All right, thanks, Brett. Amazing presentation as always. Love the stories. Definitely brought me back to when I was there. A lot of the astroisms, if you will, that you mentioned. So we have a few questions from the audience. We'll start with Wang. That's An's brother. I'll combine his questions here. What are 2020 trends, and how has design changed for consultancies? How has the industrial design industry changed since you started, and what's it like for 2020 and beyond?
Wow, that's a big question. 2020, like,
you're a big deal, so I think you can handle it.
Who said that?
That was me.
All right. Yeah. So 2020, right? It's not what we expected. The last 8 weeks have been insane. So I think it's going to have a big impact. We're already seeing requests for products that have everything to do with the pandemic. For people want to solve problems. That entrepreneurial spirit's there, but it's going to be a big shift how we work, where we work. And you see it in stock prices of companies that are tied into solutions at home, right? Well, they're going to be successful, and they might have a little bit of a jump on other people. What about when you go back to the office, or if there is no office, or you're mobile, or there's so many things right now that 2020 I think has been shanghaied by that, right? Like, it's sort of like we're going along pretty good, a nice clip off of a few fast years, and then this one is like, whoa, hit the brakes, and everybody's like, we'll see what happens when the dust clears. And now we're just starting to hear and see these things kind of moving forward. You'll still see smart products. I think you'll still see a lot of connected devices, if you will, the wearables and the AIs and the ARs and all the other, acronyms. But I think you'll see, maybe some more soulful stuff, like people sitting home, doing puzzles and reading books and, making furniture. Like I think all of those things maybe give people a little bit of pause. So maybe we'll see a little bit more, soulful craft coming back into play. I kind of hope so. I think people reconnecting with that side and getting away from screens, a little bit more. That would be my guess for maybe 2020. Before the pandemic part of it, and I think this will come back pretty quickly as well, we were seeing the interdependency of products and experiences. So you weren't just designing a product for a specific one moment, function or tool, if you will. You're seeing products and brands needing to develop relationships with their their clients and their consumers, their owners, and so ongoing relationships. And that was maintained digitally and physically, and subscription models and predictive analytics and all kinds of stuff that basically kept you connected and coming back for more with the products and brands that you're developing. That's going to continue. I mean, you guys are probably all living it. Probably had a lot more shipped to your house in the last couple of months than you ever thought you would. All of those kind of things are going to influence a lot of what we do.
Brett, just real quick side item. If you can stop the screen share so we can all see each other, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. I'm glad you're on top of that.
All good. I love what you said about soulful design, the creativity in the air now. It's certainly something I've felt recently, and I think spot on. There's going to be a lot that's changed. This is kind of the time for designers, I think, and it's really exciting. So there's a related question to this idea of soulful, I think. A couple questions actually came in about, you mentioned something about the mirror test. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Sure. This is coming from Saviwe, and let's see, Andrew Hodgson.
All right. Well, a couple of things. Like if you're designing a product for people to wear or to share or to show off, it has to pass the mirror test, which means you have to put it on, stand in a mirror and look and go like, oh yeah, I can wear that. I'll look good, right? Like that watch you're wearing right now, like that's a sweet watch, right? We know what that is. You want to show it off a little and you're proud of it, but if it looked goofy, you're not going to wear it, even if it gave you like some really nice functionality. So for us, things you put on your face, you put on your eyes and your body, those are things that have to pass the mirror test, or you just won't accept the benefit that they're providing very long. That's kind of that one little gut check. We've seen it, by the way, in a variety of things. Like we designed hockey helmets for Nike, right, years ago, and we put on these amazing hockey helmets, and the hockey players came in and like, I wouldn't be caught dead wearing that. I look like I'm a speed skater or something, or I look like I'm in a velodrome. Like I don't look like a hockey player anymore. In their mind, they had a vision of what that meant.
Just a related follow-up, I think. So when you say the mirror test, is that the designers at Astro, yourself, going, hey, I would wear this. This is cool. Or is it putting yourself in the shoes of the client or perhaps the consumer and asking, hey, would they wear this?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely, the best designers can become chameleons and step inside the skin and the shoes of the people that they're designing for. It's not easy. It's difficult. It's like, you're, if you're 20 years younger or older and you're not the same background or history, like you're going to have a hard time fully being empathetic there. But if you don't try, who will? And I think that's the designer's job, is to try to do that. Design for other designers is a nice thing to do. Designing for museums is a nice thing to do. Nothing wrong with it. But designing to improve people's lives and giving them a little joy or a little extra free time, like that's what you want to strive for, I think.
Yeah, perhaps you can relate to this, but I feel as though experience is a two-edged sword, so to speak. Sometimes it can hold you back, and sometimes it can help you see those opportunities. Also related, so when you're working with clients, how often do you have to reframe the brief, go back and forth? What's that kind of relationship like for your studio?
I'd say it's, I'll probably be generous and just say half the time. It's probably more. A lot of, clients are great, but we get on, we're involved early. Like when, when there's a blank whiteboard sometimes, or there's a brief, but it's an incomplete brief, or it's, you know, it's like, it's a starting point. And so that gut checking, coming back and resetting, we do that, man, it's almost like, you know, every time there's a review or even in between, because you discover stuff, right? You're like, oh, we learned this along the way. We didn't know that. You didn't know that because we hadn't created a prototype for that, or we haven't had that discussion. So that happens. It's nice to have the guidance, right? Like sometimes if you're just designing this product and you start that way and you end that way, that's the goal. But, you know, that's not always the goal of invention or sort of leveling up, you know, where you start from and adding new, you know, IP or experiences or features to something.
And you mentioned in the presentation, one of the ideas that design is not a democracy. Is this something you present to your clients up front, or is this just kind of something you hold closely and it's kind of your means of operating?
It's become more of our means of operating. I think, I believe we are paid for our point of view. So you need to have one, you know, so we're going to tell our clients, like, you won't get just a bunch of options and you pick. Like, you might get some options, but we're going to tell you what we think you should do. We're going to recommend a strong point of view to you. And honestly, that's what they want. That's why they hired you, is to get that. Now, they may not remember that along the way because everybody's got an opinion and there's lots of, you know, reasons behind that. You may have to remind them sometimes, like, okay, who's making the decision here? That's who I want to talk to or I want to work with. Because at the end of the day, you can't always satisfy everybody that maybe, you know, has an opinion about what you're doing. So we're always driving that point of view in the funneling of decision making.
Awesome, thank you. So this next question comes from Dominic Montante. I think you can answer this one. What advice do you have for those who want to take the plunge and start their own firms?
What advice? Learn about business. Learn about how businesses and finance and all of the accounting, all the stuff that you avoided in school like crazy. Learn how businesses work, because your clients are running businesses and you need to know why they make some of the decisions that they do, as well as once you start hiring people or working with people or taking money, you need to know how your money works. And may not be the answer you're looking for right off, but that would be my number one thing. If you really want to start a design business, is learn about business. The other part of that is, like, obviously, like, have some good relationships, right? Have some, some, as much a guarantee to get you enough runway to, to basically give yourself a chance of blossoming into something. You walk out of a place with your own portfolio, that's good to a degree, but, takes a year or two or three for the stuff that maybe you're working on to actually make it to the market. You gotta give yourself as long a runway as possible. So don't underestimate that.
So somewhat related question, follow up here from an anonymous attendee. Can you speak to your experience about starting studio, which you did, but specifically, were there any failures, any notable, times where things blew up, and what was that like? What did you learn? How'd you recover, and so forth?
Oh, that's a good question. The bigger failures probably for us were starting our own products and brands. Like I showed you guys some early piece, I mentioned subpar golf, right? We fell in love with it. It was amazing. We had it commingled in with our original business. And, for a variety of reasons, namely falling out with our manufacturing partner, it flamed out after about 3 or 4 years, maybe even less, more like 3 years. That was a failure, but we learned so much along the way. I think one of the major things is, like, we as designers, believe we're the ignition, right? The catalyst, the spark that gets these things going. And without our idea, things wouldn't happen necessarily. But there's so much work after that, right? I like to think of, like, design as really the first critical 10%, but there's like 90% that's like busting rock for a long time. And you got to honor that and understand why that exists. And then, if you know all of those other things that happen after you, the decisions you make are going to be a lot stronger starting out.
Awesome. Thank you. I remember, I think it was 2008, which is interesting. We're having this conversation now because I remember sitting with you and Kyle, and John Mullenkamp and I were like, hey, we're going to start a studio. And you guys were like, what?
Yeah.
And, you wished we had more experience and stuff. But one thing you did say that was interesting, I thought that was related, is that when you start a business, you want to start with the intention to sell it, because otherwise it ends up owning you. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that as it relates to starting up a company?
Sure. I mean, I think, you're not only trying to figure out who you appeal to, right? Your clientele, your friends, your market, but also like, what do you plan on doing with it? Like, do you want to, is there an end game? For Astro, we become, quite satisfied with the atmosphere and the playground that this offers us a lot of opportunity to launch other things, to partner with a variety of people. The goal there wasn't like who's going to own it. The goal was like, what can we, spark and spin off and set out? But eventually you have to go like, okay, how do you perpetuate these things? Or who are you trying to appeal to? So any business, we tell this with a lot of our entrepreneurs, maybe a little less on the design consulting side and a little bit more on the product brand production side. But it's like, who do you think is going to acquire this one day? Like who are you designing to appeal to that might be interested in partnering with you? And if you take that approach, then you'll have like, it's easier to hire because people are like, oh, they have a clear vision of who they are. Or it's easier to attract eventually acquiring interest, if you will, because it's like you, again, have that clear mission in the work that you're doing. So thinking about like who you're going to appeal to outside of your office, I think is an exercise that's worth having.
It's almost like the business itself is a product too. Hector Silva had a question and wanted to chime in real quick.
Yeah, Brett, thank you so much for that presentation. I think my favorite part was when you were talking about the Apple products. But moving on to the questions, everyone that I've built a relationship with and network with designers from the Bay Area, they've all have somehow worked at Astro at one point in their life. So if a lot of really good designers, Spencer, the Creative Session Brothers, David Whetstone, there's so many people that I know that have gone through Astro, and I think that speaks volumes to the leadership at Astro. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure, happy to. First of all, we hire really talented, ambitious people, right? I mean, like, so it's not a surprise to us when they leave, even though it's kind of a sad moment, right? It's sort of, every once in a while you're sort of like, are we the farm team setting people up to go to big companies? Or are we like, are we the, just the stop along the way? And that's okay. Early on, I took it a little more personal because it was like, that's my, these are my guys I'm going to the court with or going to war with, whatever it might be, right? But over time, I realized like, no, this is the natural progression of things. And I think it's based on the fact that we hire, again, these talented folks that are going to want to do more over time. And that's always exciting. Like we've had a number of people that, come back, after a while, they got some other experiences. That's always interesting. I think we're, like what attracts them, I think is a little bit more of what I mentioned earlier about the designer habitat. I think a lot of people, especially early in their careers, feel like, oh, this feels familiar. This is like a really nice BFA studio, but I actually get paid. It's like, okay, we want that feeling to kind of continue to keep the creativity flowing, right? Like interns and young designers are just as relevant to the conversation as seasoned veterans and professionals, and they've been doing it for a while. And our atmosphere is a big part of that. So that kind of leadership is key. I will share one anecdote. I don't know if it's an anecdote, but an illustration. A lot of people go like, oh man, what's it like to like lead and direct creative people? Man, they're like all over the place, aren't they? How do you do that? And I said, well, the trick is they all want to be free radicals and just like moving around in their own thing and bumping into each other. And you got to grab them every once in a while and point them in and make them lethal, like just focus them. And then before they get too focused too long, you let them go back to being free radicals so they don't think they're being focused. And it's just that give and take of like giving people space, and especially designers, right? We work to deadlines, we have projects, there's a lot of stuff there, but like, okay, go recover or go work on a different project today. Work on 3 projects, go help somebody out. You're not in a box necessarily. Long answer to your question.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. This one's from, this is a weird name, Greg Miner. Do you know who that is? You've talked about design going from simple aesthetics to holistic. How do you help your clients understand it's not just eye candy, but the holistic experience? And a follow-up, are you drinking Coke or Pepsi today?
Green tea.
Oh, okay, that's different.
Yeah, there we go. Wow, that's a good question. I think, the longer you're around design, you recognize the interdependencies and why it is a holistic approach and why you should pay attention to those things. I'm a big advocate that designers should learn the other disciplines around their field, right? Like they should actually, understand the interdependencies of the people they need to bring along and to talk with. So try to understand their jobs just as well as yours, which is double, triple timing things, right? But that holistic approach, I think, is what comes out of that. You realize that, okay, to bring a whole thing to market, we got to commercialize a lot of moving parts. And today, more than ever, you layer in digital, all the touch points, right? The web, the physical, the things you don't even see now, sensors and predictive, and algorithms, stuff that's behind the scenes. And then out-of-box experiences and beautiful logos and packaging and sustainability layered into all of that. Like the complexities are there. So holistic allows you to actually solve problems as opposed to just doing your part and then passing it on to someone else and just, kind of recreating the same problems and passing them along day in and day out. You actually are working and learning from each other. I don't know if that answers your question, Greg, but there you go.
Yeah, weird dude. Greg's an old friend. You might say he's old Greg. So this is a somewhat related question from Jimmy Nguyen or Nguyen. How can you create value in design when people or clients can justify not needing it by saying, oh, a lot of these things nowadays, a lot of products are made without a designer. But I think you kind of answered that with the previous answer there. So let's move on to another one here. As more corporations, and you mentioned a lot of the 3 companies you worked for, which I have to say, after working at 3 companies, you were a VP of design. That's incredible. Something you kind of glossed over, but as more corporations buy out consultancies or build internal teams, what do you see as the value of independent design studios, and how does that client dynamic change? And that's coming from David Miller.
David, I know him too. Good man. That is a good question. I think the value of design for me is in catalyzing, original thought wherever it comes from. And that means the designer, the people around them, the needs that need to come into play. And if you aren't able to completely catalyze and commercialize that enough to bring it forth in vision, then, you're just sort of doing workshops and explorations and things. Then you're sort of identifying things that other people have to do that hard work for. And so what I've seen is a lot of, I guess, the companies that are absorbing designers and design firms moving away from the commercialization and more of the sort of the ideation, the workshop, the post-it note, wallpaper, only, and then not getting down to, the craft, right? Making the physical and the digital and the artifacts that put real things in our world. I'm not sure if that totally answers it, but like big management companies aren't necessarily built for that. Doesn't mean that they can't learn and be complementary, but I think there's a big gap between design and development firms and most business management outfits.
Awesome, thank you. This one comes from Brian Donlin. How much does user research play into Astro's process?
Good question. Well, it plays into it. I'll say something that's probably most people don't want to know, but it's almost it's a little bit of a luxury on certain projects and timelines. Like we would all like to do it. Like the more ideas you can go out and bounce off of people, you learn so much. Now, in fact, here we have a great insights director that we brought in-house a few years ago after a lot of Xbox and Nike work that we'd worked on, because we wanted to be closer to those insights. We needed those, and we needed them faster, because you get a lot of projects and everybody's hair's on fire and they just want to get the product out the door. Of course, they want it to be perfect and every user to love it and everything to be functional at all levels. But if you don't go through the process of talking to real people and making refinement, then you're relying on designers' intuition, which might be pretty limited in certain categories. So it's important. Each category might be a little more difficult. But a lot of times, if we're not given the time, then, you know, that designer's intuition is what we have to work with. And, you know, we're fortunate we see a little of a lot, so it's probably an informed intuition. And, you know, I think that's kind of the beauty of design, is you can take a lot of input and then craft it into something. But that doesn't always work, and especially in more complex products, you know, or in life and death type products as well. You gotta take the time to marinate the big ideas.
I remember I remember showing up and feeling like I was thrown into the deep end and just like, wow, it was intense. But I can definitely speak to that. Just, you know, you mentioned hiring people who had a certain sensibility or talent and ability to move, and I think that's important as well. This, I guess, kind of touches on Kelly Custer's question as well, and maybe as a follow-up, how often do you have to then persuade your clients to do that research?
Good question. Quite often, I will tell you that a lot of our clients will come to us with big piles of research. You know, I'll call them that, right? Like, we spent a lot of money, we figured this out. Here's some prototypes, or here's a report, and then like, can you guys make something out of this? You know, it's like, here it is. You know, I gotta make something. Now, that used to happen a lot more. Now it's a lot more people know how to make it more actionable. And so if we get that, then what we're finding is we spend more time now immersing ourselves. Like, we got to try to catch up to what they know, because they actually know a lot about their, you know, about their world and their consumer or their technology. And that's difficult for designers. Like, you get thrown into something you've never been involved with, but you know design can help. How do you immerse yourself? Well, that research, you either got to do it, you know, like desktop research, as they say, or, you know, hit the ground, talking to experts. You got to go through a process just to get up to speed, or hopefully they've got it and you can immerse yourself. You can jump into the deep end of the pool, like you said, start swimming.
Awesome. This one comes from Andrew Adams. He asks, what do you do to vet a potential client to see if there's someone you'd like to work with before getting too far into the work, both from a project perspective, but also an interpersonal relationship perspective?
I mean, besides like the color of their American Express card?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess what comes to mind for me, and I don't know if Andrew meant this or not, but, you know, are there ever instances where you ethically might be opposed to something, or otherwise it challenges some core sensibility of yours, or maybe it's business? What are some of those things that pop up?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I was just being flippant. So we have something we call our ATF policy. So we don't really get involved in alcohol, tobacco, firearms. There's a lot of gray area now, right? And so you have to decide in certain, you know, certain categories, like, oh, okay, you know, how far down the military path, or the drug path, or the cannabis path, or, you know, the pollution path, or, you know, these sustainability path. I mean, there's like a lot of things that come into play. And that gray area, we kind of look at and go, okay, are we improving the human experience, right? I mentioned that in my presentation. That's really important. Is this something that moves things forward and improves that, or helps the situation? Or is it just, you know, capitalizing on something, or, you know, taking advantage of a situation? And then the other part is like the harm part, right? You know, like, we don't do weapons, you know, that's easy for us. You know, it's like we do a lot in toys and wearables and gaming. Like, we just decided we don't need that, the halo effect. People like weapons, that's fine, it's all good, you know, all day long, that's your thing. But we had to kind of like start to put in some boundaries as to stuff we'd like to work on or not. So there's a lot of things that come up you don't know, right? We got involved in cryptocurrency, right? You know, projects, and what does that mean? Like, you know, what is, you know, what are we doing with things that, you know, monitor us 24/7? How's that with civil liberties? Like, you know, like, okay, I mean, you have to make calls and be ready to make those calls. The best way to do that is ask yourself those questions early on, so you just don't find yourself going like, oh, that was a good project, they're paying us lots of money, they're well backed, but wait a minute, you know, does the world need this? Is this a good thing? And am I improving the human experience?
No, it's really admirable. I can speak from experience starting my own firm that you do get those, you know, projects that are, I guess you could say, the dregs, and you have to ask yourself, okay, is the money worth this compromise right now? And I remember turning stuff down and just going, okay, I hope things work out. So that's really admirable. Okay, I'm gonna combine a few questions here. This one's from Chris Ferentz, and I'm gonna combine it with one from Lingfang Tao. It has to do with rather the qualities of a designer. So we'll start with, do you feel like design school is necessary today? What role does that play? Do you have any opinions on design education as a whole?
Yeah, it has a role. I think it's awesome. Does that mean you have to go and be successful there in whatever successful means? Not necessarily. We hire off of two things: portfolio and personality. You know, and both of those are pretty subjective.
Yeah.
If you've got those, that helps. But the thing I love about school is it helps you figure out what your portfolio is, and it helps you figure out what your personality is, and it gives you challenges to meet, and it teaches you how to refine your craft and to figure out who you are, what's your voice, what's your point of view, and you know that is worth doing. If you told me you had 5 internships at different places and your portfolio looked awesome, okay, I don't, you know, that's an education you got right there, right? So school is sort of like that. It's like a series of, you know, strange projects that you might not like, or really cool projects that you love, and group dynamics. So school is important to put in, I think, the contextual opportunities to build a portfolio and your personality, you know, and give you confidence, like, oh, what kind of designer am I? What area of industry do I love or not love? Like, exposes you to a lot of good things, as well as like some of the most amazing designers I've ever known actually are educators. And part of that is because they love giving back and stretching people's minds. That's what we do with clients. We try to stretch their minds, or, you know, or other designers that we're working with. So
Yeah,
it's very natural to be part of that world.
one of the things I've told younger designers in the past is when you have to teach something, it forces you to think about it, and it makes you that much better having to do that. And I certainly appreciated the mentorship and experience of everyone on the team. You guys are incredible. And then the related question, somewhat related here. So you have kids out of school, or humans out of school, I should say, junior designers, and you have more experienced designers. What are maybe 3 key qualities that you could identify that differentiate those experience levels?
I think it's probably confidence, meaning that, you know, again, the more projects, the more mileage you have on doing real world projects, that experience, like it sort of magnifies and layers up and gives you confidence in your own process and your own point of view, your own take on things. You know, a lot of times, you know, people have false confidence if they don't have a lot of the real world experience, and that can get you so far. But, you know, the mileage that you put in on a designer and experiencing, you know, the variables that come at you in a real design project is key. The other thing is developing some products that have gone from idea to the marketplace. You know, you have to do that a few times, and I actually think those kind of product developers are becoming a little few and far between. They're not as many out. Like, people are specializing, right? Front end, back end, you know, 3D modeling, you know, or, you know, sketching only, or renderings, or animations, and nothing wrong with that. It's awesome. Like, you found your lane, just stick to it. But if you're a real product designer or even a brand designer these days, like, take it from idea into implementation and application, and then time and space. Let's see how it works over time and space. You know, did it fall apart? Does it wear well? Did it like deliver more than people thought? Does it become a collectible? I mean, there's so many things that happen by delivering real things to the real world.
Yeah, I like to think that consultancy gives you a certain slice of design, and then corporate gives you a slice, and entrepreneurship gives you another piece of that. And then those things, you know, you mentioned designers coming back. I think those are like the most well-rounded, experienced designers that I've been able to work with personally.
Yeah.
All right, just one more question here. We'll make it a fun one. When did you decide that you wanted to be a designer? I guess tell us a little bit about how you came to this point.
Sure. So like most of you guys, especially like Spencer, I know, I would draw my whole life as a kid, from the time I can remember. And so drawing things, people, objects, whatever, was just a lot of fun. But then I actually became more of a cartoonist. I loved cartooning, caricatures, cartoons, comic strips. Actually became a political cartoonist in high school and college, and just started like telling stories through cartoons. And I think it's because I'm kind of ADD. Like, here's just a big idea. It's a cartoon. Read it. We're done. Going to the next one. And so when I went to school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I'm like, I always heard, you should do something that you're good at. And I'm like, I'm pretty good at drawing, telling stories, right? It's like, let's do that. And the practical side of me said, well, you should be an engineer and go do that. I'm like, okay. So I tried that for a minute, didn't like it. Like, I'm going to go over and be an illustrator because I can draw. I went there and I'm like, I can do this on my own, naively. And then somewhere like between engineering and illustration, I walked through the industrial design lab and shop, and I'm like, oh, these guys are making cool stuff. Like, this is a combination of things. And then I just love the storytelling part of it, like bringing ideas to life, rendering, sketching, modeling, and then, honestly, I think that same ADD kicks in, and I'm like, there are people that are way better at taking that stuff and then polishing it and making it amazing. I'm kind of like, I like the big idea. I like to tell the first story or two. I like to get the name going. I like it to come alive and see people's reactions. And then I'm kind of satisfied. I'm like, all right, that's maybe front end and superficial to some degree. But then I love it when I'm sitting next to somebody at a, I don't know, at a dinner or on a plane or something. And I'm like, oh, you got those sunglasses. How do you like them? We designed those, like that's a little bit of an ego trip. That's sort of, you can't do every other day, it's like, so that part of bringing things from your head to the real world, like it's addictive. It's pretty, it's a fun place to spend your time.
Awesome. Yeah. I think Hector has a few follow-up and wrap-up questions and items here.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. In your presentation, Brett, you talk about that design is the first 10%. I feel like often designers think that they're kind of like the catalyst, they're the magic and the spark. But the 90% is all the hard work, all the business, and all the kind of starting with that comes with starting your own studio. Can you elaborate a little bit on that relationship and how it's important that networking is extremely crucial part of starting your own studio?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, early on, you kind of realize that, maybe this is life in general, but in a business, especially in a design studio, there are roles to play. There's the creative role, there's the business role, there's the finance role, there's the marketing role, there's the, production development side. Like, there's a lot of people there, and you can't do all of those. You may know how to do them individually, but what you need to do is to bring like-minded people together that have diverse backgrounds and challenge them to all kind of play together nicely and create new things. And that goes for business too, right? And, you look outside your walls and you go like, oh, like for example, we don't have engineering on staff, but we've got like 6 or 7 firms that we go to day in and day out that we partner up with because we love what they do and they're really good at those things. And, for me, it's sort of the internal, external part of that is key to making the whole business work. It's like, I mean, if you can't make payroll and you can't pay your taxes, like you're not gonna be in business very long. So, you got to have a great person on finance. Spencer probably even remembers this. One of my great analogies was like putting a studio together is like putting a band together.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't need 3 drummers and 5 lead singers, it's like, we got to like put all the pieces together and harmonize and experiment and, do the next album and the next album, and the next album. And that's kind of how it feels. Right. And people come and go in that process. Like if you're doing some of the things right, the people around you attract great people as well.
Yeah, I felt like when I was there, you had all the extremes. You had Jordan, you had Wu, you had Norio, you had Chris Harsack. Like, there were just so many different characters, which I think made it just such a special place.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I think it's probably looking back, and you're one of these people, it's the people that have gone through here and have been part of the story that are like extended family. It's like, oh, when I started this thing, I didn't know that they were going to be a part of our story for so long, like you kind of like, honestly, get some really great people here and do some great work. But it's like, oh, you just sort of go out in the world, and next thing you know, it's like, there's like an old guy with kids. I'm like, oh, I'm really glad to see they're doing awesome, and, we've got some folks that are competitors. We got some people that are clients now, like, all these kind of things. And like, it's just really cool to know that they threaded their world through here.
And I'm gonna
Oh, sorry, Hector. I was just gonna say,
Sorry.
yeah, it's a really special thing to be able to go home, so to speak, and you're just welcome with open arms. It's a special place. Thank you, Brett.
Oh, thank you, man. You're awesome. Like we have so many Astro alumni refugees around the place. What Hector was saying. It's like I'm glad you met a bunch of them, and people have asked us over the years, like, do you have like an office style? Like I can recognize an Astro product, and I don't think it's a style. I think it's an Astro energy, and it comes from the people.
I'm gonna kind of wrap things up with one more question. It is a very silly question. Have you ever found a dead body at the Mission Studio?
I didn't find it. The police found it. You want the story, or you want a little bit of the story?
Let's hear the story.
True story. Mission Studio. I showed you guys in the pictures, like where we're at. I'm standing at the top. We have a little platform in the back. The police open the door, and everybody in my studio points at me. And the police go a little further, and they point at me. So eventually they get to me, and I'm thinking, oh crap, what's going on? And the sad truth was, they go, do you have access to the roof on your building? And we're like, no, we don't. We have to go to a ladder. It's got to go out back. It's not our building, but whatever. I'm like, what's up? And they're like, we think there's someone deceased on the roof. And that was sad, right? That was like, oh crap. But it was like, really, right? The whole studio was like, no way. I'm getting a little spooked out by it. And unfortunately, one of the local urban campers had gone up there and had actually OD'd on top of the building. So that's pretty sad, right? But, it was sort of the last straw while we moved over to the South Market District, because we'd also had people cut a hole in the roof and slide down. Someone drove a car through the front window. Like we had people busting through and taking all the stuff off the displays and jumping back out. And, anyways, it was a scary moment, but a true one.
Well, that's amazing. A lot of memories at Astro.
I don't know if that'll make the memoirs or not, but we'll see.
Well, Brett, thank you so much for your time. You truly are an inspiration to the design community, and we really appreciate you being a part of Lens. And Spencer, thank you so much for coming on as our guest moderator.
Sure, thank you,
everyone, for being a part of this session and for being a part of the first of 2 Thursday doubleheaders. And again, we'll make this live recording public very soon on our website for those who didn't catch it, or for those who would like to go back and reference the amazing insights that Brett was able to share with us.
Thank you. Thanks, Spence. It was really good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
Keep up the good work too. This is an awesome work you guys are doing.
Thank you very much. And see you later. Have a good Thursday. Take care, guys.
Take care, brother.
Bye-bye.